Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to teach you how to outline the introduction, and then I'm going to teach you how to outline the conclusion. Then we'll take a break. We go into writing plan and the rest. So what's the purpose of the introduction? If you said the purpose of the introduction is to explain the book, you are wrong. That is boring and incorrect. A good introduction sells the reader on reading the book. It's something to remember. Just because someone buys your book, that's not the goal. The goal is not to get money from them, for most of you. If you're writing novels, then yeah, that's probably just the goal. Although none of you writing novels should be here. But for most of you, the goal is getting people to read your book, right? Because that's how you're going to get the benefits you want. If you want to be on stages, if you want to get clients, if you want to raise your reputation and authority, people have got to read the book and like it and use it. And so an introduction, buying it is not the thing. And you've got to sell them on actually finishing it, and that's what an intro does. Right. Also, think of it, I like to think of introductions as sales pages, that you're buying the reader's attention one sentence at a time in the intro. That's really what you're doing, at least at the beginning. Not later on, once you've earned it, but at the beginning you are. So here's what introduction should not do. It should not summarize the book. That is boring. No one wants to summarize the book before they are convinced they want to read it. It should not tell your life story. Nobody cares, right? No one cares at all about your life story. Even if they're reading a memoir, they care about themselves, but that's kind of a different discussion. But definitely in a reputation book, no one cares about your life story. No, don't put in a meandering backstory. No one cares. Don't have too much detail. No one cares. And don't be too long, right? So we're going to tell you, if you scroll down past, like, I think I have 10 chapter outlines, but you don't have to use all 10. There's just 10 there. You can use less or make more. Then comes conclusion, then introduction, right? So I'm going to walk you through each part of outlining your introduction. This is a really important thing, because if you write a good intro, your book's going to do well. If you don't write a good intro, it's really hard to get people to read it. So let's start with a book hook. Now, remember I told you we're going to talk more about hooks? Now we're talking about it. So here's some example hooks. Hold on, I got to move these things out of the way. All right, sorry about that. So this is from the book Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, which is a pretty good book. Let's start with a question. Why do certain groups perform better than other groups? Now look, if you're reading a book on team performance, that's an engaging question, right? Because it is kind of one of those things. Like if you're a manager, or leader, or coach, like, man, yeah, why do some groups do good and others don't? Not bad. This is the hook from our book. I've never met you, but I'm going to read your mind. Not literally, of course. I'm going to make an educated guess about why you want to write a book. Now, it's not the greatest hook ever, but it's pretty good, because I guarantee you're going to keep reading. Because at a minimum, you're like, okay, let's see if this asshole actually knows what I'm thinking, right? You're like, let's see how this guy seems kind of arrogant, right? And so, and what's cool is I detail a very specific type of person, right? And if you are that person, then you're sold. You're in, you're reading the book. If you're not, that's okay too, because you aren't the right person for the book anyway. Remember I told you great positioning both repels and attracts? This sets me up to both repel who I don't want and attract who I do want. Another one, this is from, remember David Allison was on yesterday. I think he's still watching today. He is, I saw him in the chat. This is his book, We're All the Same Age Now. I found something quite simple that could change the world. To be perfectly clear, the idea is quite simple. The research behind it was incredibly complex, and the ramifications are profound. Here's what I mean. So if you're reading a book about marketing and about advertising, and this is the intro, you're at least finishing this page to see what his argument is. And by the way, his stuff's pretty compelling. So if you really care about demographics and what he calls value graphics, other people call psychographics, same thing. He proves his point pretty well. This book, One Last Talk, is one of my favorite books we've done at Scribe. If you let it, this book will change your life. But fair warning, you might not enjoy the process to get there. I know I didn't. More than once I wanted to quit, but I didn't, and I'm eternally grateful I kept going. So that's like, okay, you read that, it's like, let's see what this is. These 4 lines finished the whole first chapter, which was excerpted in Business Insider. I went and bought the book on Kindle, canceled like 2 meetings I had that day, and finished the whole book that day. Honestly, the first chapter was the best by far. Like the book got worse and worse and worse as it went along, but I couldn't stop reading because like the first chapter and the hook was so good and the first chapter was so compelling. Look, just so you guys know, like I'm a dog person. Like I wasn't excited that he shot dogs. I was mortified, right? Now it turns out there's a reason why. Like this is about being in the second Gulf War, and they're talking about how like there were dead bodies around or something, and dogs were licking up the blood and giving their position away to insurgents or something. There was a reason they had to shoot the dogs. I mean, it didn't make it any less mortifying, but nonetheless, it wasn't just like he's not just a sociopath running around shooting dogs, because that would not be an interesting book. It would just be mortifying, and that's it. The book was actually really, really good. Okay, all right, so. The best hooks tend to start in the middle of the highest intensity, right? You may not know the hook now, and I'm talking about this is the hook in your introduction. This is the hook that starts the entire book. If you don't, it's okay, but the way I like to think about it is the hook is usually the thing you don't think you can say, but you kind of want to say. That's almost always what the hook is, right? If you don't know, it's okay. Here's a couple of tests you can use. To determine if like what you're thinking the hook is the hook. What will the audience care about, be interested in, or be shocked by? What fact often makes them sit up and take notice, people you talk to? And what's the most interesting story or inflammatory statement in your book? Now, I would not necessarily recommend being intentionally inflammatory for no reason. That doesn't always work out well. Ask me how I know. But if it's like sort of like redeployment, if it's inflammatory but in a way that really makes sense with your content and your audience, then it can actually work really well. All right, so next we're still on the introduction, outlining the introduction. So after and the hook is not just the sentence, it is usually the whole story. Like each of those hooks I showed you led to a story or an anecdote that kind of really summarized in a lot of ways what's coming or got you engaged in what's coming. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is frame the reader's pain. Here, hold on. I got to get these pictures out of the way. Zoom's screwing me. All right. Sorry about that. So the second part of the introduction is you're going to start telling stories about the reader's current pain. Why did they pick up the book, right? Now, if you notice, you've already done this, right? If you remember in the avatar, remember when you described the pain of your reader? That it's all you could, if you did that, if you really flesh that avatar out, you can use almost the exact same copy. Then the next part, if you look down at frame the reader's benefit, it's going to be the same thing you did in the avatar exercise. You remember you told us who you are, you told their pain and their transformation, their heaven and their hell, right? So you're going to really do this exact same thing in the intro. Then once you've done that, you're going to tell them what they're going to learn in the book. Right. And I really like to be very explicit. In this book, you're going to learn A, B, C, D, E, like really listed out almost like a sales page in a way. It doesn't have to be listed formatted that way, but that's really kind of what you're trying to do. Then you're going to describe the author's background and the origin of the book. So now is where you tell your story. OK, but what's relevant, though, you want to talk about what about your story matters to the reader of this book. In essence, you want to answer the question, why are you the guide that they're going to trust to help them on this journey? If you want an example of this, aside from introductions, if you remember yesterday at the very beginning, Charlie introduced me. And I've done a lot of really cool stuff in my life. He didn't talk about any of that except stuff that was related to books, right? Because I'm teaching you how to write books. You don't care about therapy things I've done or family or other businesses. It's not relevant to writing a book, so he didn't talk about it. Make sense? Okay. Then this is optional. I like to put this in intros though, is tell them what the book is and isn't. So this is generally just where you're going to literally go through. I like to signal, this is again, repelling people who are not part of your audience and attracting people who are. So like for example, in Scribe Method, I like to say things like, this isn't one of those BS how to write a bestseller books. I'm not going to give you a bunch of fluffy stuff. This book is for people who want to work hard. It's generally just a way of setting expectations so the reader really is clear exactly what's coming. Then the bottom part is segue to first chapter. It's just simply it's just a call to action. Now that you know what's coming, I'm really excited to take this journey with you. Let's get going, or whatever. All right, so a couple questions that we always get. Does your book have to have an introduction? No, it doesn't. But if you don't have an introduction to your book, then you are going to have real difficulty getting people engaged. You got to remember that you're not competing with other books. You're competing with everything in this person's life. You're competing with Netflix, with their family, with their partners, with exercise, with work, with doing nothing. And so if the book is not, they bought your book, right? Because you did a good job positioning it. But if you don't do a good job on the intro, drawing them in and really selling them on why they need to read this book and the transformation they're going to get, you're probably not going to retain them, right? Does your book have to, does your book have to have an intro? Yes. Sorry. Do you have to title your, how do you title your introduction? See, this is where things get, no. Taylor, put in here, please, that I need to make this a question. How do you title your intro is not a question. How do you title, I mean, it is a question, but it's not the question.
No.
Yeah, how do you title your intro? No, sorry. What I'm trying to say with this slide is that you do not have to call your introduction the introduction. Why? Because you probably have done this. You skip introductions to books, right? A lot of people skip book introductions. The reason why do they do it? Because most introductions are super boring, right? If you follow this template, this is the only thing in the book, really. Notice how I didn't really give you chapter templates. I give you a really clear template for the introduction, a step-by-step template. The reason is if you follow that, it works really, really well. It really engages the reader. It forces you to clarify exactly what you're offering in your book and why it matters to them. And then they're going to love it and read the book, right? So if you want to call it chapter 1, that's cool. No problem with that. But I would structure the first chapter in your book the way that I'm teaching you to structure the intro, and I would use it the way I'm teaching you. You don't have to.
Tucker,
Yes.
could you give a couple of examples of how you might title an introduction apart from no?
So let me, in Scribe Method, we call it why write a book, right? First chapter is why write a book. So like you don't have to call it chapter 1. You can just don't use the word introduction. Just say whatever your book's about, why tutoring matters, why you have to read this book, why this book is crucial for becoming the leader you want to become. Anything like that. You could, if you think of a clickbait title for the intro, that's often the best title or something like it. It doesn't have to be really extreme BuzzFeed. The 7 reasons why reading this book will change your life and chapter 4 will shock you. It doesn't have to say that.
Which Disney character are you?
That would be amazing if you're intro a book about like HR. Which Disney? Cruella DeVille. Oh, you shouldn't work in HR. What you can, not an extreme clickbait title, but like a sort of a clickbait light title is often a really good thing for an intro.
And I like that you said why you must read this book. I've seen intros that are why I wrote this book, which unless you're doing a memoir is a terrible way.
No one cares.
Right.
No one cares. Like I say this again and again and again. We're going to say it later. No one cares about you or your book. They only care about what your book's going to get for them. And I mean the readers. Your mom cares and your family cares, of course. No reader cares about you. No reader cares about your book. Only what your book will get them, right? All right.
Hey, Tucker, for the people who are doing memoir, do you want to say anything about introduction for them?
No, we have a whole memoir class tomorrow. If you are writing a memoir, that's awesome. We'll see you tomorrow when we teach memoir. It starts at 12 noon Eastern. It's on scribebookschool.com/course.
And Taylor brought up a good point. As a reminder, we include introduction examples on our course site. So
yeah, I think I'm coming with that too.
Oh, okay,
I think
cool.
I've got that. Yeah. So if I don't have that slide, then Taylor, tell me to put that slide earlier for people. So we recommend you write your intro last. Why? Because you often don't know your book. You don't fully know your book until it's written. Like you can outline, you can brainstorm, your position, brainstorm, structure, outline your book without really deeply knowing the details. But as you write your book, the details become very clear. That's why we have you outline your intro last, and we put intro at the end to write it last, right? Because often, like, a lot of the really clear turns of phrase or the sharp descriptions of things like that become obvious as you write the book. And so I see this all the time, and I've done this. You try to write the introduction first and you get stuck because you're just not sharp. You put it aside, write your whole book, you come back, it's actually really easy to write because now you know your book. All right, examples of introductions are on the site right here. I think it's chapter 10. It says intro example, the Scribe Method, intro example, fire them now. Bonus, we do have a memoir example on there too. I got there. The Scribe Method intro, I think what I do on there is I actually demarcate each section of this intro. So you can see it says like start hook, end hook, start pain, end pain. You don't put that in your intro. I just put that in here so you could actually see the sections. And those are not representative of how long they have to be. Some people will write a 3 or 4 page hook. And if it's a really compelling story, that's totally cool. Just make sure your lead sentence is really engaging and the full story is engaging. You can go 4 or 5 pages. Remember this, there is no such thing as attention span. There is only engaging content and not engaging content. So you can have a really long story if the whole thing's really engaging.
Can you elaborate a little on that? Because I'd imagine certain people are like, did he just say no such thing as an attention span?
Yeah, so I'll talk about this now. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later too. There is no such thing as an attention span, right? There just isn't. It's not true. It's a myth. The idea that someone has a poor attention span is not true. Now, some people might have a lower threshold for boredom. That's absolutely true. Some people you can just sit there and read the tax code and they'll still stare, sit and watch. Other people, unless you're giving just a rousingly engaging speech or routine, are not going to watch. There are different thresholds for boredom, but there is the whole idea of attention span shortening and whatever is not true. What's happened in the last few decades, especially with the advent of the internet, is that we've seen an explosion of content. So people have way more choices. So they're spending way less time on things that they don't like or that don't engage them, right? And so don't complain about people's attention span. If people aren't paying attention to what you're doing, it's because it's not engaging. It's part of look at this webinar and these slides. Like, we've made this as entertaining as possible, even though we're teaching stuff, right? And even though if you really want to write a book, the expectation is, well, you should just sit through it. No, that's BS. That's bullshit. Like, because we can teach the same information while still making it fun and enjoyable and entertaining. And if we can do that, then more people are going to learn, right? Same thing for you in your book. Also, the memoir example, the I Got There intro, we wrote this as the opening scene to a movie. So it's very visual and emotionally engaging. So you want to see what like a really kind of like a movie intro would look like written. That's what it looks like.